Good.
Okay, we're going to move forward. The Ilhem Chai Ha'olam, this is eternal life. Da'at Otcha, to know you, Elohim Levadecha, one true God. Et Yeshua HaMashiach Asher Shalachta, Yeshua the Messiah, whom you have sent. This is for this reason, for this truth, that our synagogue exists. We also offer our people to come through our doors in the manner commanded by both covenants in Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah 31, and in Acts 21. We were commanded as Jewish people not to abandon the customs of our ancestors, the covenant of Abraham, the Torah of Moses. We are to remain Jews as we follow the God of Israel and hold faith in the Messiah of Israel. For this reason, we offer the gift of authentic Jewish continuity to all our people to come through our doors, or in this case, come through our airwaves. We welcome you. Our whole evening in this light becomes one long mitzvah, the fulfillment of a commandment. And so we say together, bless.
Join us if you know it.
This commandment, or this blessing, recognizes the commandment to remain Jewish as believers in the God and the Messiah of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu b'fi shliachav lishmo et minhagei am Yisrael. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us through his apostles to observe the customs of the people of Israel. Amen.
Amen. And we are going to be lighting candles right now, so if you have candles, please go ahead and let's get ready to light them. And we're going to scoot over just a little bit here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu b'chol Shabbat. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who have commanded us to light Shabbat.
Amen. Amen.
We're going to continue with Amachala. And the point.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen. And offer you virtuous.
I'll take it.
Debbie is sipping for all of you virtually.
On behalf of everyone.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Adonai melech, Adonai melech, Adonai nidok le'olam va'ed. The Lord was king, Lord is king, the Lord shall be king forever. Amen.
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 L'chad Odi, we welcome the Shabbat. I think everybody knows this one. L'chad Odi likrat kana, v'nei Shabbat likacha. L'chad Odi likrat kana, v'nei Shabbat likacha. Shamor zachon, Ibo echad, Ish
Shabbat Shalom. Please join me for our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, and face east towards Jerusalem. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. And you sing responsibly. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Praise Adonai, the Exalted One. And you say, praise be Adonai, the Exalted One, throughout all time.
Please turn in your Siddurim to page 28.
For the evening blessing, and if you're standing, please be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Asher bidvaro ma'ariv aradim, who through his word brings on the evenings. B'chachma poteach she'arim, in wisdom he opens gates. U'bitchuma mishneitim, and in understanding he changes times. U'mechalif et hazmanim, and he exchanges the seasons. U'mesader et hakochavim, and he organizes the stars. U'mishma botem b'rakir kilsomo, in their courses in the heavenlies, according to his will. Borei yom v'layla, creator of day and night. V'lev ol mitnei choshech, v'choshech mitnei or, the one who rolls light before darkness and darkness back before light. Ma'avir yom mevi layla, and he brings to pass day, and he brings on night. Ma'avir bein yom ubein layla, and he differentiates between day and night. Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, the Lord of hosts is his name. And Chai v'Kayam, Hamid yimloch alenu la'olam va'ed amen, la'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who brings on the evenings. We're going to be visiting some ideas we read about just in this one blessing tonight. We're going to be talking about Adonai Tzevaot tonight, maybe in a way that you haven't thought about him before with that title. And we talk about the differentiation between day and night. For those of you who are members of Bethel, you know that on our listserv, we shared an article today our Rebbitzin found and shared with me, and I shared with you about finding a way not to make life in quarantine to Groundhog Day, where every day is exactly the same. There are ways that you can actually take that pressure off your soul by deliberate effort and planning. You can actually push against that kind of pressure that comes from being in quarantine, where the usual routines that differentiated your day and night times are moved out of the way. This is a very important idea, the idea that we are able to sequester what we do at night from what we do at day. Because with electronic media now, we can be at our jobs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even walking along the street with our families, we cannot be with them. We can be working. And even at night, we can be anywhere in our homes and be working. So this idea is crucial to healthy living. I offer that to you. I just want to make this comment before we move on. The way that I read the blessing to you tonight, oftentimes I'll read the Hebrew straight through, and then we'll have someone from the synagogue read it in English. What I did tonight is how we read when we have Shabbat services, we have Shachrit, we have morning services. When we do the Shachrit service and we read from the Torah scroll, we read in this model, which is taken directly out of Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 8. It says that the leaders of Israel taught the Torah to Israel, reading the Torah and giving the sense as they read. That is how I evolved this model for Bethel's practices. But we don't chant the Torah. We don't ornamentalize it. We teach it from the scroll. And this is how we do it. So once we have Shabbat services happening in the mornings as well as the evenings again, I hope you'll join us and partake of that kind of scriptural practice that we hold dear here at Bethel. With that in mind,
Shabbat Shalom. Please join me in reading the English for the Ahavat Olam. With constancy you have loved your people Israel, teaching us Torah and mitzvot, statutes and laws. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down to sleep and when we rise, we shall think of your laws and speak of them, rejoicing always in your Torah and mitzvot. For they are our life and the length of our days. We will meditate on them day and night. Never take your love from us. Praised are you, you, Adonai, who loves the people Israel.
If your kids are with you, then you get ready to bless them. And we'd love if you could have a picture of the kids receiving the blessing. We can at least share it together on Zoom and in the congregational website or the congregational listserv, so we can feel together, at least see each other together.
יעשינכם אלוהים כאפרים ומנשה, שר ויקה וחלב לאשר בנות ישראל. May God make you all like Ephraim and Manasseh, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, who built the house of Israel. Amen. יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחנך, שא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. May the Lord bless you and watch over you. May God make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May God lift up his presence upon you and give you peace. We now turn to bless the God of Israel. The song, if you turn to page 83 in your Siddurim, you will find.
That's page 83.
You will find Baruch She'amah, which is the blessing we say before we start musical worship. Baruch She'amah v'haya ha'olam baruchu.
Praise is God, whose word created the world. Sing praise.
Baruch oseh b'reshit.
Glorified is the author of creation.
Baruch omer b'oseh.
Laud the one whose word is performance.
Baruch gozer u'mekayem.
Acclaimed is God, whose decree is fulfillment.
Baruch merachem al ha'aretz.
Revere the one whose mercy envelops the world.
Baruch merachem al ha'briot.
Adored is God, whose kindness embraces all creatures.
Baruch meshalem sachatot yit'at.
Honor the one who rewards those who revere him.
Baruch chai la'ad v'kayam lanetzach.
Blessed is God, who lives forever, who endures eternally.
Baruch podeh u'matziv.
Celebrate the one who redeems and rescues.
Baruch shmo.
Praise is God's name. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, compassionate creator, extolled by your people, glorified by your faithful servants. We laud you with psalms of your servant David. We extol you in song. We celebrate your fame with melody. We proclaim you sovereign, singular, eternal God. Praise are you, Adonai, sovereign, magnified with songs of praise. Kiatav, Kiahavta, and it's in everything that I will do, I will love you, Lord. In every place that I will be, I will love you.
What I love about this song is that it was written by a second generation Messiah believer in the land of Israel. This is authentic Israeli worship. And it's such a privilege to be able to share it from here in New York, which is, Manhattan is the westernmost suburb of Jerusalem. So we are in a place where if you sneeze in Manhattan, they say there's a type of field, but we do really love this connection, feeling connection that comes from being able to savor music authored in the land. The same words in English. This is our prayer, individually and collectively. In everything that I will do, I will love you, Lord, because you first loved me. In everything that I do, oh, I will love you, Lord, because
my heart. I will love you, Lord, with all my soul. My strength and all I have with all my heart. I will love you, Lord, because you first loved me. In every place that I will be, I will love you, Lord. בכל מקום שאהיה, אוהב אותך אדון, כי אהבת אותי ראשון. בכל מקום שאהיה, אוהב אותך אדון, כי אהבת אותי ראשון. בכל ליבי, אוהב אותך אדון, בכל נפשי. With all my heart, oh, I will love you, Lord, with all my soul, my strength and all I have, with all my heart. Oh, I will love you, Lord, because you first loved me. We love you, Lord, with all of our heart, with all of our strength, with everything that we have. We will worship you, magnify you. Wonderful to see everyone worshiping with us today. I think my son might be watching us. Oh, my son is actually.
Hi, boys.
Wonderful to see Scott, our dear friend Amy, entering into Shabbat together, entering God's rest. It is not a burden. We are not under law. We are under love. The love of God contains us, restrains us, guides us, leads us. From Psalm 66, verse 2. You are glorious, O God. Glorious, O God, awesome in your power and praise. You are glorious, O God, glorious, O God, glorious in all of your ways. You are holy, there's none like you, and you are worthy of all that I could ever do, and your glory, oh, it fills the universe, and yet you have considered me. How I love to be with you, I need to be with you. You show me love in so many ways. That's why I love to be with you. I need to be with you. You fill me with compassion and grace. And you are holy. There is none like you. And you are worthy of more than I could ever do. And your glory that fills the universe. And yet you have considered me. How I love to be with you. I need to be with you. You show me love in so many ways. to be with you. Oh, I need to be with you. You fill me with thanksgiving and praise. And you are holy. There's none like you. You are worthy of more than I can ever do. And you don't know me. All fills the universe. And yet you have considered me. You are glorious, oh God. Glorious, oh God. Awesome in your power and praise. You are glorious, oh God. Glorious, oh God. Glorious you shall ever be. You are glorious, oh God. Abba, give us rain. O Lord, send your rain. Let your spirit wash our hearts with power. Make us new. Make us vessels, Lord, for you. Written by you might know these records. Bless you, O God. Let's really focus our hearts on this prayer, especially in this time. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah, give us rain. Oh Lord, send your rain. Let your spirit wash our hearts with power, your power, and make us new. Make us vessels, Lord, for you. Let the name of God be our strong tower. Hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Hallelujah. Make us strong, make our words a joyous song. Let the chains fall from our hearts in praise and your praise. And through your Son and the victory that you won, make us Lord to walk in your ways. Lift him up, oh lift Yeshua. Let the eyes of his light behold your Son, the Messiah, King, and the Lord of everything. Let Jacob come and the Holy One. Hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Make us strong, make our words a joyous song. Let the chains fall from our hearts in praise and your praise. And through your Son and the victory that you won, we are called to walk in your ways. Hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. 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 Oh, hallelujah.
The Shema is the cornerstone of our faith. It's the declaration of God's plan. And God's invited his people to hear the Shema just as we obey. So we heed this directive by facing Jerusalem. We cover our eyes and we block out all things and ask God to speak into our minds and our hearts. We say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod, Malchuto, Leolam, Vaed. Amen.
אהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אלוהים מצווך היום על כבודך, ושננתם בנך, ודיברת בם בשבתך ביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ושבתך ובמנך, ושרתם לאות על ידך, והיו תותפות בין עיניך, ושבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך.
And now we turn our hearts to the portion of our service where we devote our attention to receiving the engrafted word from Scripture, the revelation from God that is confirmed by the prophetic thumbprint of God upon Scripture. We do this devotedly. We pray for each other in this process. We say, El Nav Fanala, Lord, heal her, heal. We pray our whole nation as we devote ourselves to the study of Scripture. We pray that the power of revelation to change our heart, to heal us, would truly come to pass. We pray all of this in the name of Messiah Yeshua. We devote ourselves to Scripture, and it is a mitzvah to do so, so we bless as we start. And we say, as the words on the screen hold forth, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kitsham b'mitzvotav, tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments, who commanded us to engage with, to do business with, la'asok, to do business with the words of Torah, or teaching, revelation. The parasha for this week is Balak. The parasha Balak, we go according to the Israeli reading schedule, and Balak is found in Numbers 22, starting in verse 2 and going to chapter 25, verse 9. It is also in Micah 5, verse 6, and going to verse 8 of that book for the Haftarah. Again, that's Numbers 22, 2 to 25, 9, and Micah 5, 6 to 6, 8. I have to tell you, I'm very excited about the message I'm going to share with you tonight. I'm going to run a little bit long because we don't have an oneg tonight, so I'm going to take a few extra minutes because I have a ton of information that I believe is going to affect your spiritual life, not only for the rest of your life, but I think this television show, this service turned into a television show, is actually going to be a resource. You're going to want to point a lot of your friends and relatives to. There's a lot of information I'm going to cover tonight that just between you and me is stuff that people have not heard before. It's not being taught, well covered in houses of study all throughout the Jewish world. There are texts that are being largely ignored. They have massive implications for our people religiously, and they're simply being kept out of the conversation. So I'm going to do my best to go through this. Quickly, but not too quickly, and I'll let you absorb this information. The title of this message, of this focus, is The Passover Messiah, and I have a trademark next to that because that is the copyrighted title for a book
I'm working on that is also the title of a magazine feature article that I wrote many years ago. The passed over Messiah. A Messiah in Jewish literature, clearly written there, that is simply being bypassed all the time, and it needs to stop. Our synagogue stands for that, by the way. We are a Two Testament synagogue, and we affirm that Messiah. The subtitle to this sermon is When My Education Led Me Where I Did Not Want to Go. I had the privilege of being given, as a result of very hard work by several generations of my family before my own generation, I had the privilege of an excellent education. I went to one of the best prep schools in the United States, and I went to one of the best colleges in the United States. And the things that I learned in prep school and in college led me to the faith I have now. They led me as a Jew to accept the Messiahship of Yeshua of Nazareth, and you will see why when you are done this program. If you have never seen the things I'm going to show you tonight, you are going to have some really serious thinking to do. The Parashat Balak is excellent as a pivot point for this. This week's the Parashat HaShavua, it boils down to this: God kept telling the prophet Bilam something he didn't want to hear, so Bilam kept pushing and finagling until finally he found a way with plausible deniability to do other than God's will. Unfortunately for Balaam, humans look on the outward appearances, but God looks on the heart. We might try to finagle something like he did with God, but in the end, God had declared his intent to bless Israel. King Balak had promised to pay Bilam handsomely if he cursed Israel. Bilam could not find a way to pronounce a curse on Israel with God's power behind it. And so, Bilam used his knowledge of God against Israel by telling Balak that if Israel could be induced to sin grievously, the harm would surely befall the nation. So the plan caused harm, but it did not accomplish what Balak was paying for or what Bilam wanted. So it usually goes when you mess around with the Most High. Now, let's flash back to the 1970s when I was a junior in high school. And the USA was in the full flush of the counterculture movement. There were hippies, Hare Krishnas, Jesus freaks running around everywhere. Everybody was into everything. And as the joke goes, our minds were so open our brains could fall out. There was this hunger to get away from the materialistic focus of the post-war era, and people were walking around with empty hearts, confused because they had everything they could ever have wanted, and yet they still felt empty. And that it was part of this tremendous counterculture move that incorporated what we think of now pretty much as the Jesus movement, the Jesus explosion. The Messianic Jewish movement of now was sort of shrapnel from that explosion, because while this focus upon Yeshua of Nazareth occurred among all nations, Jewish young people were coming to faith, and they were coming to faith, I among them, we were coming to faith without abandoning our Jewish identities. We understood that this first century Israeli was the Messiah. The Greek words Jesus and Christ, that's just Greek for a Hebrew name, Yeshua, and Christos is the Greek word for Messiah. So we understood somehow. God just sovereignly made us know, as the book of Acts says clearly in Acts chapter 21, we were not to abandon our heritage, our Torah, the circumcision of our sons into the covenant of Abraham. When I first came across this idea in high school, my school chum Bob spoke to me about it. Hi out there, Bob, by the way. Spoke to me about it, and I argued a blue streak against it from every angle you can imagine. A Messiah who dies, really. Someone or something else paying for your sins. These are not Jewish ideas. So said my father, Alav Shalom, may he rest in peace. My dad was an Ivy Leaguer and a very sharp mind, and yet, despite having been given a very serious Jewish education, he said these things that fly directly in the face of everything written in Jewish religious writ. The scriptures, you go somewhere and you're going to find the idea of sacrifice for sin and substitution and vicarious payment for sin everywhere throughout Jewish religious literature. So how could someone as well educated as my dad get this wrong? Well, I went to a lot of Jewish religious leaders and poked around. I asked very irritating questions. One of my favorite stories in the entire Talmud is the story of a guy named Reb Jeremiah. It tells us that there was a property discussion going on. To make a long story short, he asked a question, and the response was, it tells us for asking this question, Reb Jeremiah was thrown out of the yeshiva. And that's very much the kind of experience that we have as New Testament Jews when often we pose the question, why can Yeshua of Nazareth not be the Messiah? But there's far better fuel for that idea than just that negative sort of question. When I was talking to leaders in my youth, one rabbi named Eddie from Princeton University Hillel pointed me towards this book. He said, if you start reading this book by Gerald Siegel in the morning, by noon you won't be a believer in Yeshua of Nazareth anymore. So I did. And right up front, in the introduction, where I have it highlighted here, he posits this idea that in order to arrive at the theological concepts that they desire, missionaries, meaning people who believe in Yeshua of Nazareth, they present altered constructions of the meaning of biblical verses. And these altered constructions bear no relation to any of the beliefs taught by priest and prophet, the authentic teachers in Israel. Well, it's a powerful statement. Is it true? He offered chapters on things like the pierced Messiah, the Messiah as the Son of God, and he made what I imagine he thought were strong arguments. But even as a near to graduating prep school student, they seem to be very tenuous and not well founded. But I want to affirm this idea to you before we move forward, that Rav Shaul of Tarshish, or Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, he said this. He said, I stand to this day testifying to both small and great, stating nothing but what the prophets and Moses said was going to happen, that the Messiah would suffer. Well, is that true? Here's the goal of this sermon. To show you, well, first of all, it's to correct the spelling of this particular word, but then also to show you the indisputable proofs that the ideas about the Messiah you might currently dismiss as non-Jewish, as being from a new religion called Christianity, well, they are in fact ideas from within Judaism, known and considered and spoken and written by Jews as far back as 100 years before the birth of Yeshua of Nazareth. Before he was even born, they were defining these Jewish concepts that I'm going to put in front of you. I just put Proverbs 19 in front of you, Proverbs 19:2. It's not good to be without sufficient knowledge. Before we rail at an idea as not being Jewish, it's good to know whether or not there's evidence for it. Just to be very simplistic about this, if you argue with me that there is no such thing as a flying animal, and you stand by it because you have never seen or been told about or shown any evidence that there's a flying animal on the face of the earth, at the first confirmed sighting of a bird, you have a lot of reorganizing to do mentally and emotionally. Once it's confirmed that you saw a bird and that bird actually exists, it's not a figment of your imagination, once that happens, my friend, you are in a whole different life, because you now know that there are flying creatures on the earth. Well, is there a suffering Messiah in Judaism? That's a good question, and it's a yes or no answer. Either there is a suffering Messiah within the framework of Judaism, or there's not. And if there is, we should talk about him, shouldn't we? The Messiah, the most important human personage in all of human history, we should certainly, and he's going to suffer for us, we should find out what that's about. Let me take you back to our homeland, to south and somewhat east of Jerusalem, to the area of Qumran, marked with the star there. Somewhere between 100 years before to 100 years after the time of Yeshua of Nazareth, there was a group of religious zealots who lived in that area, and they deposited scrolls in clay jars in the desert where the dryness and the environment kept those scrolls preserved across 2,000 years. They were discovered in the 1940s and 50s by Professor Elazar Sukenik, well, actually by a couple of shepherds who then told Professor Sukenik about them. But those scrolls were put in a library and they were studied, and in the 1990s, they had been kept secret for so long from people could not get at them to study them. Only a very small team was allowed access. So Dr. Robert Eisenman of the University of California at Santa Clara, I believe, he somehow got a hold of the Bechtel family's library. They had commissioned a facsimile library of these fragments, and it was published by Dr. Eisenman through the Biblical Archaeology Review magazine auspices. And this is the edition. I bought this so hot off the press that I got my copy before Eisenman got his. That's how on this I was. Now, also, there is a resource that you can go to that's far better, because I bought these books in the 90s and the photography was of much lower quality than it is now. And with the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scroll Digital Library that is governed by the Israel Antiquities Authority, which is free to everybody, you can just go and look at high definition photographs of the Dead Sea Scrolls that nobody could look at a very short time ago. So here is the bomb that set off the whole echo that was going on during the 1990s. I want to use this to pivot to this series of ideas that I think are just going to blow your mind. Get ready for your world to change. This fragment is called DSS, Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q, meaning Cave 4 at Qumran, 4Q, 285. Fragment 285, this is 7 among the fragments of the fragment. They tended to be broken up into little bitty pieces. But what does this fragment written in Qumrani Hebrew say? Here's what it says. I'm going to actually move my screen a little to the side here so the full text can be visible. This fragment says, Isaiah the prophet. Then it talks about there will go forth a shoot from the line of Jesse, which is a quote of an Isaiah prophecy. It refers to Tzemach David, which is right here, Tzemach David, and a branch of David, and his trial, Nishvato, and his judgment, his trial, and they will try him. Both constructs work in Hebrew. Down here, the Hamitul V'Siha Iddah, and they will kill the leader, the prince of the assembly, the Edah. Adat Yisrael is the congregation of Israel, and it's a name for the whole people of Israel. Adat Yisrael, they will kill the leader. Uva mechalalot, by piercings, and by piercings, the tziva kohen, and commanded, or by command, or at command of the priest or the official. And then down below here, chaleli kol, emptied out entirely, accursed entirely, totally. Well, the idea that the Nasiha Edah, that the leader of the entire Kahal of Israel, would be killed by piercings, remember that word, piercings. This is going to be very important shortly. This rocked the religious world when Dr. Eisenman's fragments were released, his collection was released, and people began to be able to look at these fragments and see why they were being covered up. And it was, make no mistake about it, a cover-up. Look at this fragment, 4Q 521. The top line, the heavens and the earth will obey his Messiah. What? Messiah is a supernatural being? And over the poor his spirit will hover, which is the quote again from Isaiah chapter 61 about how the Messiah would do good works among the poor and do healings. The faithful will exchange power. That's another quote from Isaiah. Yechalifu koach, that those who wait on the Lord will yechalifu koach. They will exchange weakness for power. Prisoners will be freed, which is yet another Isaiah quote. And then down here, very, very clear, metim yechim, the dead will come alive. The dead will come alive. I find it hard to even get past the first fragment. We could talk for days about this. Hashemayim v'ha'aretz yishmu'u limshiacho. The heavens and the earth will obey his Messiah. And the next line says, and over the poor his spirit will hover. This, it's linking the earthly compassion ministerial Messiah to supernatural presence. That, well, you might argue, okay, for quick thinkers, we'll go to this. You might say, well, Shema, if you know Hebrew, Shema means to hear, not necessarily to obey. So it might just be that the heavens and the earth hear his Messiah. Big deal. But the very idea just sort of neutralizes itself, because why would, since heaven hears everyone, there's nothing heaven doesn't hear. Why would it be so important to write down in a scroll about the most important figure in all human history that heaven hears, if heaven hears everybody? The issue here is that heaven will obey the Messiah. The Messiah is some sort of ruler of the heavenly realm. Let's go on, just in case we run out of time, which I don't want to. Another fragment, 4Q246. It's set for another mind blower. I'm pointing with this arrow to this top line, which is the most impactful. And this line says, Bara di'eh, the Son of God. V'tayiru barayon, and they will hail him as the Son of the Most High. I put it in regular Hebrew in case you don't read the Qumrani script that I put up here. To clarify, it might not be easy to read on the scroll itself, so I used the Qumrani font and actually wrote out the script of the scroll here for you to see plainly. Bara di'el, the Son of God. V'tayiru, and they will hail him. Bar Elyon, the Son of the Most High. Now, if you read this whole fragment through, again, more Isaiah quotes, and it says right here where my cursor is moving. It says after they will hail him as the Son of the Most High, or glorify him, like the Most High, like a shooting star. It's a reference to the prophecy in Numbers about the star from Jacob. It's the title of the Messiah. All nations will worship or serve him. In Hebrew, the word for worship is also the same as service, lavod. And the great God will be their help. He himself will fight for them, putting peoples into their power, and all of them. He will cast them away before him. Look at this quote in regard to this Son of God. His dominion will be an everlasting dominion. This is from Psalm 145:13. Malchutcha, malchut kol olamim. His kingdom will be forever and ever, of like the eternities of eternities. This person, Baal Di El, Son of God, the Tadu Baal Elyon, they will hail him as the Most High, Son of the Most High. Now, what does definitively Jewish faith say about these ideas? Let's suppose that the Qumranis were just a hippie commune that got too high. That they were just off, that they were somehow either drug addicts or they were cuckoo or they were something that makes their ruminations not really valid as an idea, as a springboard for valid Jewish religious thinking. Let's just visit that dark side for a moment. Since Siegel says that non-Jewish advocates twist the biblical passages to get false non-Jewish ideas that lead to the messiahship of Yeshua of Nazareth, let's start with authoritative Jewish views now. Let's take these Qumrani ruminations from 2,000 years ago and compare them with the authority on what Jewish thought is, which for most people they think of it as being the Talmud. It's actually the scriptures, but I'm going to go to the Talmud because most people would tell me if I went to the scriptures that the Talmud probably says the opposite of what we do as New Testament Jews. What does definitively Jewish faith say? Well, here are the scriptures right here. And here's the Talmud. Let's just look at a piece of scripture and then compare it to Talmud. I'm putting the scripture here in English and Hebrew so that there's no doubt. Nos du yachad. They foundation themselves together or in unity. Al Adonai, against God, Va'al Mashiacho, and against his Messiah. Al actually means on, but like the rebellion of Korah, it said that they kahaled al Moshe ala Haron, they congregated against Moses and Aaron. In this context, grammatically, it means against. So, further down in Psalm 2, Adonai Amar Eli, God said to me, Beniyata, you are my son. What? Beniyata, I'm moving the cursor right underneath it. You are my son. Ani hayom yolidicha. Today I have begotten you. God has a son. The Quran says, Allah forbid that God should have a son. Well, I'm sorry to say that the scriptures that the Quran tells us we should actually respect state clearly God has a son. Nachaltecha, ta'achuzetecha, afse aretz, and I will cause you to inherit as your possession the ends of the earth. This takes this out of the realm of referring to King David. Gerald Siegel argued this is a psalm about the King David's son relationship to God, and this is an advocacy to respect his kingship. King David never ruled to the ends of the earth. King David's kingdom was a localized kingdom. And it says down lower, Nishkul Vav, kiss the son, do homage, do kingly obeisance to the son, pen yainaf, lest his anger be kindled. This is the portrait of a ruler who is the Messiah, Mashiacho, he is God's Messiah, and he is the Son of God. And he is going to rule, he's going to rule the entire earth. That's my timer going off. He's going to rule the entire earth. And we have the obligation to show respect to him, to honor his kingship. The entire second psalm really is about humankind trying to break the bonds of moral government off of ourselves and just do whatever we want. And God is enjoining us, saying, respect the king that I have installed. Respect the musal, the discipline that comes from governing your actions rather than just letting yourself go. If you look at Psalm 2 here, let's talk now about the Talmud. The Talmud refers to Psalm 2 specifically. It quotes in this parasha, or rather in this tractate of the Talmud, and I'm just going to see if the screen will cooperate with me here. But this is in tractates Sukkah 52a. You're looking at the exact, this is from my library, by the way. I just want to show you. I'm not giving you secondhand information. The books I'm citing are right here. This is, a little part of my library, and right here is a set of Talmudic tracts that have very, very relevant information regarding the presence of a suffering Messiah in Jewish literature. So that being said, look at what tractate Sukkah 52a in the Babylonian Talmud says. It says, they refer to a passage of scripture where it says, Ani hayom yilidticha. Today I have begotten you. They're talking about the Messiah, referring to, look at the top here, look up here at the top of the passage. The Gemara cites a Baraita, which is an unattributed information piece from a teacher that is not cited. A Baraita, it says, relates to the death of the Messiah descended from Joseph. Mashiach ben Yosef, they call him. And look at this. And they're referring to Psalm 2. The Messiah who's going to die is somehow connected to this Son of God in the second Psalm. So to say that the second Psalm doesn't refer to the Messiah, as Gerald Siegel did, is an impossible argument to support. Now, all of that, was all that just non-Christian Jewish twistings of meanings? I've cited no Christian commentary. I haven't referred to one Christian source. This is all intra-Judaic, and it all dates back at least 2,500 years. He said to me, you can see it on the page right there, Today he said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, I will surely give you the nations for your inheritance. Now, I didn't read one word to you from any Christian source. Let's go further. What about a Messiah who would suffer and die? Is there more content on this? Well, if you go to the same tractate, you look at the further down, you're going to see that it uses the specific title. Here the words in Hebrew are Mashiach ben Yosef Shenehao, Messiah, son of Joseph, who will be slain. In Hebrew, Retzach is murder, and Lahamit is to kill. So Laharog would be more like to slay, like a ritual slaying, like the slaying of a sacrificial animal. Messiah, son of Joseph, who will be killed, is referred to by the Talmudic rabbis. Here it tells us that that this Mashiach ben Yosef Shenehao is conclusively, I took the Hebrew out and drew it out for you fully on the page so that you could see it, any of you who are Hebrew readers, that this linkage exists and it can be found by anyone who studies the Talmud dispassionately. It's just sitting there in black and white. So we have this construct, and it links Psalm 2 to this Messiah who will be killed. By whom? By Christian theologians? No. By the Talmudic rabbis. They're the ones making these linkages. Spotted anything non-Jewish yet? Let's go on. What other biblical passages attached to this idea, and is there more Talmudic support for it? Well, if you go to the Talmud, this TB stands for Talmud Bavli, or the Babylonian Talmud. There are two Talmuds, Jerusalem and Babylonian. So this is the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 98a. It tells us that the Messiah must come during the Second Temple era, which is between 445 BCE, when the first temple was destroyed. I'm sorry, when the decree by Cyrus was given to go back and rebuild the temple. It is from that period to 70 CE when the Romans destroyed the temple again. So in that period, let's see what this text says. The Talmudic rabbis refer to Zechariah 9:9, which describes Jerusalem's king riding into Jerusalem humble, mounted on a donkey. And the discussion of the rabbis here is one rabbi saying, well, we won't have a Messiah because Hezekiah was the Messiah. That was the first temple king of Israel. And one of his comrades rebukes him and says to him, well, Chas Hashem that you would say that. Don't say that, because we are told by Zechariah the prophet, is it not written that the king will come mounted into Jerusalem on a donkey, and Zechariah is a second temple prophet. Zechariah did not prophesy during the first temple era. The first temple was gone long before Zechariah ever showed up. So this discussion is right there on the pages. And you can see, again, this is not from some Christian book. This is from my bookshelf, right over my shoulder, right here. I just took the books down and photographed them with my iPhone. That's how you're looking at the pages. Right here. Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet humble, riding on a donkey. And the Talmud tells us Zechariah, who lived long after Hezekiah, predicted the Messiah's arrival. It's evident, therefore, that Hezekiah was not the Messiah. So now we're told the Messiah will show up on a donkey in Jerusalem during the Second Temple era. Is it beginning to strike any bells? Is all that just Christian twisting? Still no non-Jewish sources anywhere. We have thus far, from looking at what the Qumranis wrote and what the Talmud has asserted about the same ideas, here's where we're at. We know of a Messiah who Jewish people believed would rule heaven and earth. A Messiah who is the Son of God. A Messiah who will be slain. A Messiah who will somehow be a branch of David and the son of Joseph. A Messiah who will arrive during the Second Temple era, and not a Christian book in sight. Were these the random opinions of non-authorities? Let's go to Sanhedrin 98a in the Talmud. And there you will see quite astonishing words. The rabbis say that his name, which is the name, they're discussing the name of the Messiah, will be, and they call it, here it is, it's Kavara. It is, they say Metzora, but actually it means stricken. It means like hit, because in Hebrew, Nogea it means touched. It means that you've been touched by a disease. So they say that is his name. This Chayvara, this stricken, is the best title. Shene'emar, and they say right here, Shene'emar, as this said. And now they start quoting a line of scripture. Achen chalaynu hu nasa. Surely our sicknesses he bore. Machbotenu savlam. And our pains, or the blows to us, he carried. V'anachnu choshavneu nagua. And we considered him, here it is, nagua, stricken. Hukat, hit. Elohim, by God. They're quoting Isaiah chapter 53. Something that Gerald Siegel said definitively, every Jewish authority agrees is a description of Israel's redemptive sufferings for the world. Well, I actually got into a debate with a rabbi. I was invited to a discussion of this in a company where one of my congregants was one of the senior vice presidents, and the president of the company was Orthodox. And these two guys decided to kind of pit us together, sort of like a cockfight. They wanted to get us together like a couple of roosters pecking at each other over the differences of these ideas. And this is where the debate ended. This idea, I told the rabbi I was debating, his name was Heshi, said, look, I believe this is how it's going to go, is that we're going to agree on everything up until around Isaiah chapter 49. Once we start talking about the suffering servant in Isaiah 42 and work our way to Isaiah 49, where it's stated that the Messiah will redeem all nations, not just Israel, we're going to move forward to the portrait of the suffering servant that is so clear in Isaiah 53. Somewhere in there, it's going to blow up. That's what my prediction is. It's exactly what happened. Because when I pointed out this line of Talmud, this guy Heshi had opened a commentary, an Orthodox modern commentary, and pointed to how Isaiah 53 refers only to Israel and Israel's sufferings. And I said, well, that's great, but here's authoritative Jewish commentary from the Rishonim, from the first order of commentators. I just opened that book right behind me. I opened it up and put it on the table and read the verses in Hebrew to him. The guy slammed his hand on the table and said, I don't want to study this way anymore. He just walked out. It's a lot to process. The rabbis, it says, it doesn't just say here, look up here at these little words. It doesn't say some rabbi said, some dissenting rabbi, what you would call in the courts a minority opinion. Rabbanan Amri means the council of the rabbis speaks, they agree. This is their agreement. That stricken is the best title for the Messiah, and when they answer why, they quote Isaiah 53, the best, most stunning portrait of the Messiah. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquity. The punishment of our peace fell on him. By his stripes, or whip wounds, we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each one has turned to his own way, but the Lord laid upon him the sin of us all. If you've never read it, you owe it to yourself to give yourself the treat. Read the whole chapter and realize it was written 700 years before Yeshua of Nazareth was born. Who endured all of those things for us? The council of the Talmudic rabbis agree. The Messiah suffered all those things. And the passage goes on to say that he would offer himself up to death for us. How can this be so if there's also a Messiah, son of David, who's foretold to rule humankind and reign over nature? Recall Dead Sea Scroll 4Q 521. The heavens and the earth will obey his Messiah. Well, this is my shocking closer, I believe. Is if you go to the Talmud again, to a further section, Sukkah 52a, you see that they quote Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, which says this, in regard to this stricken Messiah. They will look on me, the one whom they have pierced or stabbed, And they will mourn over him as one mourns over an only son. Understand what's happening here. That it's God talking in first person in Zechariah 12, and he says, "V'hibitu Eli," they will look upon me or gaze at me. Habitu Eli is like stare at me. Et ashel dekaru, the one whom they pierced. Who's they? Humankind pierced this one that we're staring at. Why are we staring at and mourning about him as for an only son? Well, if you go a little further into Zechariah, you'll find, here you can see the actual Hebrew word, so you know I'm not twisting anything. The Hibitu Elayat Shel Dekaru, Savdu Alav, Maspid Al Hayachid. They will mourn. Maspid is mourning, like you do for in the home of someone who passed away. Al Hayachid, for an only son, for a firstborn. Okay, so now, Zechariah 14 says, the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations in that day, as he fights in the day of battle. His feet, see, the Lord, his feet is what? The Lord will fight. His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem and to the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west, a very large valley. So you have the Lord, just as earlier it was the Lord speaking, saying, they will look on me whom they have pierced. Somehow God is talking in the first person through the mouth of this Messiah. Do we believe the Messiah is God the same way that the Heavenly Father, the ineffable God, is God? No. But if you ask me, do I believe that the Messiah is divine? I will say yes, but not the way you're saying it. It's a complicated question. I actually don't like to talk about what the Messiah is because I'm more concerned about, and so is Scripture, by the way, with who the Messiah is. What the Messiah is something even Rav Saul gave up trying to understand. He tells us in one of his letters, he was in heaven, he descended to earth, he gave gifts among men, he died, he rose. Who can understand this? Paul gave up. He said these things are just too big. He devoted himself to making sure that human beings knew what they needed to know to enter into right relationship with God, to be reconciled, to be atoned for. And that's always been my focus. That is the practical focus of all this. Now, all of what you're seeing, which I've compacted into as rushed and small a little window as I could, this is all based on the idea that if you seek, you'll understand. When this question was put across to me in the early fall of 1972, I decided to give it the same kind of attention I give any idea. Rather than just dismissing it out of hand, I thought, well, okay, this is a premise that's being, shoved at me by my friend with real vigor. The Bible was being pushed toward me, and he was, encouraging me, look, this is your book, and it claims to be certain things, and it claims to say certain things accurately. Either those things are true or they're not. So, bon appetit, So I went to town on it. And as I said, my education, the tools that I had been given in my education, those things led me to faith in Yeshua, not away from it. And when I went to people and asked them questions, like that rabbi in Princeton that I engaged with, he said, well, if you want to believe in this Yeshua, and I asked him, are you crazy? I came here so you would talk me out of it. What do you mean, Doc? Well, want to. But he wasn't giving me answers that made any sense. And my further journeys into Jewish literature of faith kept reinforcing the messiahship of Yeshua of Nazareth, that he was indeed the suffering Messiah who was foretold. Now, I tell you that I sought and I found. These are just little snippets of the kind of seeking that I did through the Tanakh, through the Hebrew scriptures, through the Talmud, through the Dead Sea Scrolls. I didn't pre-decide what I would learn. I decided to go looking where the information was to be found. And I came to the same conclusion that Yeshua said to the Shomranit, to the Samaritan woman he spoke to, as recorded in John 4, which is that he is indeed the suffering Messiah. There is in Judaism a portrait of a suffering Messiah who was and is the Son of God, who is a supernatural being who will rule heaven and earth. Jews have been talking about him since as far back as 100 years before Yeshua of Nazareth was ever born. Probably farther, but these guys in Qumran, they wrote it down. They're like the Talmud. Those scrolls are kind of like tape recordings of their conversations. So I want to invite you now to ask yourself a question. Will you seek? Will you not just dismiss the question out of hand, but will you give it the attention it deserves? Because, as we tell people in our services every week, eternal life is bound up in your response to God's choice about ruling earth, ruling human beings. It is his right to rule. Scripture tells us that since he created it, he owns it. The earth is the Lord's, Psalm 24 says, and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it, because he founded it. It belongs to him. It is not right that we would rule. We are renters, not owners. We've been given a lease, so to speak, but we don't own. This is not ours to do with what we please. We are under a government, thank God, literally a government that is a government of good. Will you put aside your determination to call the shots in your own life and consider yielding the government of your life to God in line with these recommendations that come out of our scriptures, even as dense as the ones in Psalm 2, where God is directly contrasting the Messiah, the Son of God, with you. Like, are you going to rule? Or is God and his Messiah, are God and his Messiah going to rule? Is your response, let's break these bands off of us, these moral constraints that naturally come with yielding to God's government? Or are you going to accept the government legally, so to speak, the precepts of the one who has the right to govern us? And this, in line with Parashat Balak this week, if you will take God's answer, rather than go scraping like Bilam for a better one you like. I mean, one of my favorite jokes, my congregants know this. There's a joke. I first heard it from my dad. It is about a mountain climber who slips and he's like falling down and he's partly hanging off the side of the mountain and he cries out, God, if you exist, please, God, if you exist, come help me. And a voice comes from the cloud that says, if you believe, I'll help you. The guy says, I believe. So the voice says, then let go of your left hand. And the guy yells back at the cloud, if I let go of my left hand, I'll fall. I can barely hold on. The cloud says, do you believe? Yes. Well, then let go of your left hand. So he lets go with his left hand. And I was hanging by one hand. And the cloud says, do you believe? He says, yes, I believe. Please help me. The cloud says, let go with your right hand. The guy's response is there anybody else up there? Well, you may be asking yourself that question as you look at these pieces of information from Jewish writings that go back as far as 2,000 years about a Messiah who is both supernatural and a ruler, and also will suffer and die for us, somehow return, we'll see him come back, we'll recognize him from the pierce marks in his body, it'll shock the living daylights out of us. He'll go forth and do battle for Israel and rescue our nation from destruction. All of this rolled into this one portrait where somehow two Messiahs are one but separated by the river of time. My hand, here are my two hands, but if I put them to you like this, they look kind of like one hand because they're separated by space. Well, the Messiah is on the timeline. You may look at the one portrait of Mashiach ben David and ben Yosef. They are hard to see separate unless you go up above the timeline so you can see the distance between the two. But this returning Messiah, whose feet are going to land on the Mount of Olives, we recognize him by the pierce marks that we put in him. And yet he is a supernatural ruler through God of heaven and earth. There is a suffering Messiah in Judaism. We know him to be Yeshua of Nazareth. If you keep seeking, if you are bold enough to do this journey, you will find that you get an answer. So I want to encourage you really with all my heart to consider what it is that the Shaliach, Peter, spoke to our people in the temple as recorded in the book of Acts. Will house of Israel know that God has made this Yeshua of Nazareth both Lord and Messiah, whom we slew. Not Israel only, the whole world, the whole human race. And God, we are told in Isaiah 53, it was God's good pleasure, it was his plan that the Messiah would suffer and die for us. No one human being or group of humans is responsible. But there is one God and one Messiah the Shema holds true. There is no other genuine God to go to. That is the truth, as Rafiki said in The Lion King. You can either run from it or learn from it. What is it going to be? More biblically, Ad matai atem poschim al shtei asfim. Well, how long will you go back and forth between two opinions? If the Lord is God, then follow him. If Yeshua of Nazareth is indeed the Messiah, then receive him. Accept him. Accept this gift of atonement and of a righteous ruler over your life that God has so kindly proffered to you, to me, to all of us. Let's look to God in prayer. Let's simply pray for God to sort this out for you, to help you find your way through it to the right disposition of it. Let's pray to God together directly. Heavenly God, in the name of your Son, we come to you and we ask you that you would very simply turn on the lights in every heart, that you would fill people with courage to look for truth and find it, and when they find it, to act upon it. That you would strip away the confusions and the lies and the deceptions and the deflections that this whole array of ideas is enmeshed in, and allow the conversation to begin again within the house of Israel about the suffering Messiah, about Mashiach ben Yosef Shenehar, Messiah, son of Joseph, who would be slain, whom we in 2 Testament Judaism already know to be Yeshua of Nazareth. Yeshua of Nazareth, our Messiah. It is in his name that we pray. And anyone who believes the same things with me can feel free to say, Amen. Amen.
We invite you, as the service is moving towards closure, to make your tithes and offerings through the link that will be appearing to you on the screen, or may already be there by now. We are so grateful for all of you. I mean, I could spend a while on this. I wish we had more time, but we are so grateful that you are maintaining the support of the synagogue, enabling the synagogue to tool up for this virtual season, however long it lasts. This technology is not cheap, and we are grateful that you have enabled us to be able to do this. And we look forward to building together with you, and please God, be back in our beautiful sanctuary, where we will continue to broadcast our services from there in the future. I've already had one grateful phone call from another side of the country saying, one thing I'm grateful for during the CV-19 lockdown is that it motivated your synagogue to put your teachings on the air. I was very grateful to get that kind of a phone call and know that this has actually been useful to people. And pray that it will continue to be so for whoever it is that tunes in. This brief blessing, because tithing is a mitzvah, and we want to follow the ways of Israel in this. We will say these words, and if you know them, please feel free to say them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'toratecha, bidbar בנביאיך, ובברית בחדשה. מצווה רבה מקבלת את המעשר ואת התרומה של ישוע המשיח. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us by your teaching and through the words of your prophets, and commanded us through them and through the reading of the Shabbat to receive tithing and the offerings of Israel. We will now move to Kaddish. This is, as we move towards the end of the service, we move back towards the contemplation of eternity. The reason why it is looking out, that we do all the things we do.
May God's name be exalted and hallowed throughout the world that He created. Nitkedal v'yitkedash shemei rabbah. V'yamad yirat yirteh v'yamlich ma'ateh. V'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayeh l'chol beit Yisrael. V'adala u'zman k'riv v'yimru. Amen. Yeheshme Rabban Barach Leolam Ulamei Almaya. Yibarach Yishtabach Yikar Yomandi Haseh. Yitadav Yitalev Yitala Shemei V'Gudisha Richu. Leila Min Kol Berchata V'Shirata. Tushbachata V'Nechemata. Damiran Yama Yinguru. Yehesh Lama Rabba Min Shemaya. V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Yisrael. Yinguru. Amen. Aseh Shalom V'Muna. Huya Aseh Shalom. Aleinu V'Al Yisrael. Yinguru. Amen. May God grant peace and comfort to all of you.
Now I'm going to continue with Adon Olam. That is on page 54. Before creation shaped the world, God eternal reigned alone. But only with creation done could God as sovereign be known. When all is ended, God alone will reign in awesome majesty. God was, God is, always will be glorious in eternity. God is unique and without peer, with none at all to be compared. Without beginning endlessly, God's vast dominion is not shared. But still, my God, my only hope, my one true refuge in distress, my shelter sure, my cup of life, His goodness real and limitless. I place my spirit in God's care, my body too, and feel God near. When I sleep, as when I wake, God is with me, us, everyone. We have no fear.
Adon Olam Hashem B'terem bo Yitzir Nivra Leik Nasa B'chef Soko Azai Melech Shemo Nivra Ve'acharei Yiglot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora V'hu Chaya V'hu Hovei V'hu Yiyeh V'tifara V'hu Echad V'ein Sheni L'cham Shilo L'hadira V'li Reshit V'li Tachlit V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra V'hu Eli V'hai Go'ali V'tzur Heli V'eit Tzara V'hu Nisi U'manosli Manat Kosi V'yom Lecha V'ya'ado Achilachi V'eti Sham V'ha'ira Ve'im Dvachi Yaviati Adonai Li V'lo Ilah.
If you would turn in your Siddur to page 177, this moment is actually considered so holy that we have to take steps towards it the same way that the priesthood was incited to take steps, commanded rather, to take steps towards it, to assure that we would properly treat the holiness of the moment. We among the Kohanim, say these two blessings in advance of the third blessing, which is the final blessing. Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. Barchenu, bless us. B'bracha ha'mshuleshet b'Torah, the threefold blessing in the Torah. Hakatuvah al yedei Moshe b'cha, one written by the hands of Moses, your servant. Ha'amorah pi Aharon v'Arav, spoken through mouth of Aaron and his children, Kohanim, the priesthood. Am Kedoshecha, the people of your holy things. Ka'amo, as it is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'kedushato shel Aaron v'tzivanu levarech et Amo Yisrael ba'ahava. Amen. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, instilling holiness in us through the sanctification of Aaron, commanding us to bless his people Israel in love. And thus it comes to us. Words commanded directly by God to be said over Israel. Yivrechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Amen. Ya'er Adonai panav lecha v'yichunecha. Amen. Yisad Adonai panav elecha v'yisamnecha shalom. Amen. May Adonai bless you and guard you. May Adonai show you favor and be gracious to you. May Adonai show you kindness and grant you shalom, peace, wholeness, completion. And in this atmosphere in which we live now, with a pandemic and with societal upheaval, to handle as a society, as a group of people trying to live together, may God grant you wisdom as to when to be silent and when to speak. Grant this in the name of the one who lived that balance perfectly, Messiah Yeshua and Master. All who believe with me, please feel free to say Amen.
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 Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom to you all.